Okay, we're back. We took a week off. We're starting to record every week now, and this is episode 2. We're telling your life story. We left off last week with basically you meeting my mom, Lori, and we're picking back up there. Before we do, is there anything that that we missed last week, or you want to bring up or talk about before we get started?
Yeah, something I'd love to jump into off topic, so to speak. Yesterday, though, in our real estate life, we had an incident come up where someone tried to steal some of our joy and rain on the good works that we're out there to do for other people. And Mom, Lori, quickly came out with a Denzel Washington quote that really summed things up. And you have that right there?
Yeah, I can pull it up. Okay, I'm just going to read it. The quote is, if you had $86,400 and someone stole $60, would you throw away $86,340 for revenge or move on and live? Each of us have 86,400 seconds every day. Don't let someone's negative 60 seconds ruin the remaining 86,340 seconds you have. Life is bigger than that, and so are you. And 3 emojis.
And that's what it's all about. It's picking up, it's moving on, it's next, it's getting into action, it's doing, it's not waiting, not lamenting, not getting burrowed down in sorrow, finding your way and doing actions that are important to you. And for whatever reason that negativity has come into your life, it has happened, and you learn from it, and you grow from it, and you just move on.
Yeah. I think if there's one thing I've learned about or from you, if there's one thing I've learned from Mom, it's how to move forward, how to what's the reframe that you're going to take and move forward. If there's one thing I've learned from you, it's that you're being upset by something like that or being hurt by something like that is natural, okay. You have to feel it. You have to accept it, not as truth, but that it hurts. And you can't just bury it, because if there's one superpower you have, it's emotionally connecting with other people. And you can't emotionally connect with other people if you don't validate that feeling in yourself. And therefore, if you can't validate that feeling in yourself, you're unlikely going to validate it in someone else.
Yep, absolutely. And, I was thinking about this morning, and what kind of examples do we have? There's so many on how to navigate through these challenges, and thinking about who are the greatest role models in our lives. And when you look at leadership, when you look at how things are to be done, it all boils down to love. And how do we show love to one another? And the greatest example of love, regardless of your religious affiliation, you look at the life of Jesus Christ, who came here, and his whole purpose for being here was to love on us. And how did he lead? How did he manage his people, those that he came encounter with? He showed love through example. He was all about leading by example. And what better way is there to encourage the lives of those around us, to foster them and to help them grow, than to just show up and lead them in the way that, life is best done. And, my goal, our goal in the work that we do is to love people. And Greg Doak, local man, was a mentor, has been a mentor for me, especially when you kids were young. I'll never forget, and I think this might be from Covey, who said, the greatest form of love is time. It's the time that you spend with people. And that has always just been my mantra, especially with you kids, pouring time into you, especially when you were young because you were in our fold, and then having the ability to continue to pour time into you whenever possible now. And the same thing is true with whoever you're with. And when you're with them, how you spend that time, you have to be present. You have to be there with that person or those people that you're with. And if you find yourself with your eyes wandering, who else is at the party or who else is at the event, you're not present. How can you bring yourself in, rein yourself in so that you're truly with that circle or that one person that you're talking to, and in particular that one person, because if you're in a group, you're talking to one person. So it's a challenge, and yet, I've just come to realize that presence is a really important thing, because that's when people know that you're listening, and listening is part of loving. So tirade there for a bit, or rant.
No, it's great. Yeah, Greg always said, love is spelled T-I-M-E.
Love is spelled T-I-M-E. Yes.
That's a pretty good one.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well,
okay.
I said yesterday that 999,999 people love you, and one person could say something negative about you, and it is crazy how much that can affect you. Not crazy as in not understandable, just
oh yeah,
it's amazing what the one hater online or the one hater, whatever, does to us. And people are so afraid to put themselves out there or do anything, myself included. I don't mean to say other people, because we're afraid to face criticism, and you cannot do anything in life if you don't put yourself in the arena to face criticism.
Yeah, I journaled about that this morning, as a matter of fact. By putting yourself out there, by putting content out, if it's just showing up anywhere, you're gonna face criticism. You're gonna face people who have opposing opinions, and I think about that as something new in this format that we're entering into, this podcast, and it does make me, recalibrate, sort of rethink what that might look like. And in reality, all my life, I've set myself up for criticism because I chose to be different. I didn't want to be elitist, I guess I'd say. I just wanted to be different. I didn't want to follow the path of, well, this is what everybody else has done. And, the particulars for me that I focused on in being different, because you could find very, very many ways to do that. For me, it was, I'm going to be kind to everybody. I'm not going to swear. I'm not going to use bad language about people. I'm not going to gossip. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to, be mean to my wife. Just those ways. And, thinking back, it wasn't necessarily, it was pretty easy in grade school because we were all the same. But, coming into high school, it wasn't easy. There were times when, people would be criticizing me, making fun of me to some extent. I never suffered from it because I didn't pay attention to it. Did it hurt me? Yeah, because my personality. It did hurt me, and I wanted those people to understand where I was coming from. I didn't care if they liked what I was doing. I just wanted them to know the why. And, those people, I've learned more and more, either struggle with something in their life that makes it hard for them to connect with that, or they're curious, and their curiosity and their lack of understanding leads them to react in a way that's maybe negative, and that negativity is really driven by fear because they don't understand. and maybe they want to step into that a little bit, but they don't know how. They've never been exposed to it. So that's how I rationalize it in my mind, and it's not going to stop me. I mean, I remember people saying growing up, "Oh yeah, you'll be like this for a while, and then you'll grow out of it." You know, I'm almost 60 in a month here or two. Why? There are certain things in life that, yeah, I'll continue to grow and change in. Those are not some that I will.
Yeah, maybe between 60 and 70, you'll go crazy.
Yeah. And, I've always found my crazy in other ways. And
Yeah,
that's been fine.
That is what I think about the most is you had healthy outlets. People really need to push against something, and, you can push on alcohol, or you can push on, relationships or getting in trouble with the law or whatever it is, rebelling against your parents. You just pushed physical boundaries or
fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
What could I do that was fun and exciting? And, I, learned at a young age. I was probably 10 years old, I guess, when I was hanging out with Danny Fault, who was 6 years older than I am. And, just an incredible athlete. And I watched him and said, ooh, I could really like to do those things. And I'm just so fortunate that I was introduced to that through him, that could be my way of finding fun, adrenaline. That's been my drug, adrenaline. And in many, many ways, all the different sports and all the different things. When I was a kid, I couldn't find a sport that I didn't like, that I, wouldn't want to excel at. Just, I got my joy from that and my excitement. And I'm glad that I had that. If I hadn't, I'm pretty sure I would have found other outlets and they wouldn't have been positive in my life.
Yeah. Anything else on that?
I think that's good for today.
Okay. All right. So we'll pick back up with the story. When we left off last time, you had just met Mom. We really left off. You and Mom were dating. I don't think we had got to you being engaged.
No. So Mom and I started dating, and full disclosure, I guess might as well go there. I'd been to Mexico my first semester freshman year through Colby College. And while I was there, as I mentioned, had a great roommate and a Mexican brother in the house who, introduced us to lots of people. And one was a girl who was his girlfriend's sister, and corresponded with her. It's questionable in our household, as you know, whether I was dating her or not. However, we stayed in correspondence, and then Mom comes more into play through Aunt Holly's wedding, and there's receptions going on around that, and all of a sudden, this Mexican girl wants to come to Maine to visit. Well, it's the same time as Aunt Holly's wedding. So I'm dating your mom. This girl's coming up from Mexico. And long story short, we're at the rehearsal dinner the night before Aunt Holly's wedding. And Mom is there. And Susana is there from Mexico. And Susana's sister, because the Mexican girls would not go unaccompanied. And I'm not with them at that time, but they're at the dinner table, and I think Mom or Susana said to one another, "How do you know Rick?" And the Susana says, "Well, he's my boyfriend." And that certainly put an interesting look on your mom's face, which then turned to a very uncomfortable conversation with me and your mom about what's going on. And a lesson I learned at that particular point, real hard and fast, was you can hide things, but they're always going to come out. And so that was a a challenging experience because I didn't want to hurt this girl from Mexico. And, I was very much in love with your mom and made for some uncomfortable conversations, uncomfortable situations with Susanna, with your mom, with my family, my mom and dad. And, had to make some choices at that particular point in time. And it wasn't easy. Your mom was the choice. And, we, after the wedding, continued to date. And, I was at a point in life where, I'd always been super serious about life and future and wanted very much to have, my dreams come true. And I wanted to be married. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to, jump into the family business and just jump into life. Partly because, high school, college were fun, and yet I was kind of living, I don't know, through other people, I guess, more than I wanted to live. I didn't really want to live that way as much, and I knew once I had a family that would be my nucleus, and that's where I would grow and develop probably the most. So, and yet your mom, she had come out of a particularly unhappy relationship, I guess. It didn't end well. And so she wasn't really in a place right in the beginning, I don't think, to maybe be as open to rushing into things. Not that I wanted to rush into things. I didn't want to rush into things, but, I was ready to be serious with someone. And everybody in my family knows I'm always ready to be serious about almost anything. So we dated, and, I wasn't out of college yet. I was still in college. I would be a junior at this particular point in time. And, I would be the first one in our family to graduate from college. And I know that meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to my parents. And so there was that in the back of my mind, getting married before I've graduated from college. That was something that, was, I wanted to graduate first for them. And inside of me is this burning desire to spend the rest of my life with your mom. And so we got engaged.
Was she more inclined to be engaged, or were you? Was she like, hurry up, like, let's do this thing? Or were you like, I really want to be engaged? She's like, I don't know.
I think it was both of us. Yeah, it was both of us. She's 2 years older than I am, so she's out of college at this point in time. And she is working at Unum and looking to build her career, start her life. So she's ahead of me on that curve. By the calendar, by desire, I'm right there with her. I was ready. And so we were on the same path. Probably on the outside, it looked like it might have been her more than me. It certainly wasn't. And so we got engaged October 84, it would have been. And, I think that came as a surprise to most people. I say a surprise. Maybe it wasn't the happiest time for a lot of people, which was really frustrating time because I knew your mom was right for me and she knew I was right for her. And it was a time when I had to put aside, a lot of negative pressure from other people because people didn't know Mom and they knew me. And, there were a lot of people whoever I picked wasn't going to be the right one. They had certain expectations for whoever that was. And there was a lot of bruising, a lot of hurt there. There was a lot of $60 out of that dollar amount that Denzel talks about that really caused some heartache for a lot of people and unnecessarily. So had to forge through that. And, we were engaged for, let's see, a year and a half. Yeah, wow. A year and a half. And then got married in February 1986. And, we really wanted to wait until September to get married. That was sort of a month that we wanted. And yet, timing, everything worked out. Because I graduated from college early.
When did you graduate?
So December of 85.
Okay. So you were out for a couple months before you were married.
I was out for a couple months before I got married. Yeah. And I graduated, and I think I started working that next Monday. And then we got married in February.
And you started working for Bisson.
Yep. Started working for Bisson Moving and Storage, the company that my grandfather started. And, I was again hitting a milestone of where I was headed. And what I've learned more than anything else is that those milestones are set and they move, sometimes forward, sometimes sideways. You just have to be prepared.
What do you mean by that?
So when I was growing up, life revolved around family, and life, part of that family was the moving and storage business, which your great-grandfather, Lucian Bisson, started, which I talked some about him. Yep. And he started that business, and then your grandfather and your great-uncle Francis bought the business from him in the mid-'60s, and then they grew the business a great deal. And now I'm entering into, and I always wanted to from my early days, because this was such a part of our life. I wanted to be involved in that business, not just involved. I wanted to be the president of the business. And to me, I wanted to follow in my grandfather's footsteps and my father's footsteps. And, my uncle had done a tremendous amount for the company. And I wanted to carry the legacy on. When I was in school, from, my whole schooling, I always remember that the one thing that kept me going was, I need to learn this because I need to do well in business. When I was at Colby and I wasn't getting that business experience, I knew I needed that because of my ultimate goal to run the company. And that's, that was what I wanted to do. I remember sitting on my grandfather's lap as a little kid, and he would ask me questions, and somehow or other would come up, Ricky, what do you want to do in life? And I want to run the business, Grampy. And it was just I can remember sitting on his lap. I remember the smell that we all have our own personal smell. I can remember smelling him and just sensing the joy that he had, and that he had such a twinkle in his eye and that great French accent. And that just kept embedding in me that this is what I was meant to do, not just wanted to do, but meant to do and driven to do. And so, I get the chance to get out of school and go to work, and I'm all in. And I'm working in the office. I am, working sort of I ultimately became the office manager, working with the people in the office. And I'm young, and I think I know more than I know. There's family members involved. There's 7 of us, third generation, that are involved, that have been working for a while to try to figure out how to navigate this transition of the company on our own, so to speak. And at the same time, Uncle Francis and Binky, your grandfather, are working to grow the business, to help expand the business so that there's enough room for all of us to grow in the company and for the company to survive. So there's a lot of growth going on. There was a lot of challenges. You look deeply into the third generation process, and that's the typical failure rate is in the third generation. I was just doing some research and reading into another company, and just an amazing story about the entrepreneur that starts, the entrepreneurial next generation that continues that legacy, and then the third generation that's expected to come in to a company that is no longer really entrepreneurial. It's now a corporation. And how do you survive in that with the heirs, so to speak, not the heirs, the founders who are still involved and kind of overshadowing sometimes how things are going to be in the future. It's just very challenging in that third generation. 85% failure rate, I think, is what I've read before.
Does that mean failure to pass on or failure period? Like
That-
it would be sold as opposed to passed on?
That's a great question.
I would assume it includes going out of business and or being sold.
Or being sold, yes. Yeah, I would say it's both.
And 15% the third generation runs
Yep.
successfully.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, right here in town, the Reed and Reed construction business, I think they were in 6 generations. So it can work. It's never easy.
Yeah. That business very much felt third generation. Like it's sold before the third generation.
Bisson moving stores?
Sorry.
Oh.
Reed and Reed.
Reed. And how was that?
Because, well, I guess to me, it feels like that, but that's not the reality of the situation. Because I just remember Bud Reed running the business and then Jack and Tom running the business.
Yeah.
So to me, it's Bud, Jack, and Tom, and then
Yeah.
didn't make it to the
Right.
third generation.
Right.
But it had actually been,
There's 2 or 3 before
Yeah,
that. Before
it's crazy.
Bud. Yes.
it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to shipbuilding times.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're at Bisson,
Married,
married.
Bisson. So we started work roughly the end of 85, and then we get married in 86, and October 26, 1986, your older brother Lucian is born, and we start life as a threesome, not just the 2 of us. So short honeymoon baby, and we were so excited, and that just kicked off things with our family, living in a house just down the road from where we are now, in the same neighborhood, across from all my neighbors, living the dream, being in that house. And your sister Jamie was born there 15 months later. And then how many years later, we had tried for quite some time to buy another house in the neighborhood that was a derelict. It was next to the house that I grew up in. And we ultimately were successful in buying that and restored that. And then you were born there.
Did you work with an agent on that?
We did not work with an agent on that. Nope. That house was owned by the Pittman family, and it had, when I was growing up, Dr. Pittman, a dentist, lived in the house, and there was an addition off the back where his dentist office was, and he kept the house very prim and proper, and they owned the house next to the one that I grew up in, and across the street there was a Cape that they owned as well, which is the house that we live in now. And Doc Pittman had several children, one of them being Fred Pittman, and Fred and his wife Margaret ultimately inherited the house and moved in, and things were good for a while, and then Fred had a drinking problem, and the house really fell into disrepair. It was a very sad situation because it wasn't the house that was deteriorating as much as it was Fred and Margaret and their relationship. And, it was my first exposure to alcoholism, I would say, on a pretty grand scheme, because Fred would, I'm sure Margaret got tired of him being in the house, and he'd be outside in his car drinking, and he would yell and scream and say things, and just a terror. This is in the middle of the day. It's not at night. Just a sad situation.
How old were you do you remember Dr. Pittman living there and having his practice there?
Yes. Yeah, not well.
From,
but I do remember.
okay, so let's say that was before you were born to how old were you when that was no longer the case?
When Doc Bettman sold, you mean? Or when he was no longer there? Or,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, gee, I was probably 8 or 9.
Okay, so
I'm
then
guessing.
Fred has the house from then on.
Yeah.
Was it because he died, or he's gay,
Doc Pittman?
or moved into a
Doc Pittman passed
home?
away.
Okay,
Yeah. And then Fred and Margaret moved in.
and they inherited both houses,
Yes.
and then
Now,
they
however, Fred inherited the house along with his siblings. And I've lost track now. I think there were 4 siblings that all had an equal ownership share in the house. One of them had passed on, so his shares were granted to the other siblings, I guess I should say. And so one of Fred's siblings that was still alive was married to the Robart family, Jason Robarts, and who was an actor. And they had actually spent some time at the house in growing up and had an attachment to the house. So now we've gone from Fred's sister, who was married to Jason Robarts. Fred's sister has passed on, so it's the children that now own the shares. And we're trying to buy this house that's a derelict house, and we're trying to buy it from Fred Pittman, who was an alcoholic. Fred and his wife have divorced now, and Fred has what we referred to as the red house, and Margaret had the house across the street, the one that we live in now. So we are in the process of trying to negotiate with Fred and the 3 Robart children who are out of state and have a connection to the house that's, perhaps I'll refer to it as a romantic connection of what it was at one time.
Yeah.
Nostalgic, yeah. I mean, their childhood memories of what the house was, very distant from what it was then. I mean, when we so we go through this process, and we make steps forward. I talked about that that goal, or that goalpost moving, and we would make steps forward with Fred, and then we'd fall back, and we'd have conversations with the Robarts, and we'd move forward and we'd fall back. And this was, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 years it took before us. So the first thing we did was Fred had some health issues and had to have some surgery, so he got cleaned up for a while, and we had some great conversations with him and made some progress. And I don't remember if we had the documents signed then or not, but we had an agreement, and then he fell off the wagon again, and we were back in we don't know what's going to happen land. And then Fred somehow or other came around, because our goal was, if we could get one of the owners of the house to grant us ownership, we would then be participating in the house. Huge risk on our part. We didn't have a lot of money, and yet we were willing to put, to buy the share out and then be able to participate with the other children to see if we could slowly buy them out. We bought Fred out, and, maybe a few months, 6 months, 8 months later, the Robarts also agreed, and we bought them out. We bought the house. And it's a funny story, because we didn't have an agent, and your mom did an awful lot of legal work. I mean, she was writing the quitclaim deeds to transfer the ownership. And a few years later, when we were meeting with an attorney about our estates and things like that, our affairs, he was pulling up some of our past history, and he said, your mom, he says, "Laurie, you have got to stop practicing law," because her name was recorded in the registry quite a few places. However, that's what it took to get it done, and we bought the house and renovated that over the whole time that we had it. It was a great house. It was a great house to grow up in. It was right next to my parents' house. We had a view down to the river. We owned a little piece of land across the street on the river and had an apartment on the end of the house that we could rent that created some income for us. It was a great place to be.
Did you do most of the work on that, or did you have Morse and Doak do most of the work on that?
Morse and Doak did all the structural work.
Did you paint every inch of that, or did you have someone paint it?
We actually had somebody paint outside.
Okay, I'm just imagining.
Yeah, no, the paint. So the house was called the Red House.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was known in town, and it was the red, peeling, flaking,
Right.
house that hadn't been painted for 35 years, maybe not that long. It was in need of a good painting job, so we did hire a professional painter to paint it. We had some money from selling our first house that we could pour into this one, not a lot. So we did hire a painter. We hired Morse and Doak and said, listen, we have this amount of money. We need to get this amount of work done. Let's do the best that we can. So they came in and replaced sills, tore walls out. We did the demolition. I will say what we played in the role was doing demolition, clean out. Where we needed to, we pulled down plaster and pulled out the bad insulation and made repairs to that. I say repairs, like the drywall people would come in and repair that. Then painting was my thing, or wallpapering or that kind of thing. And any of the landscaping we did on our own, building stone walls. I did renovate the barn. I had Morse and Doak come in because basically they took one of the corner posts out completely up to about the ridgepole because it was so rotted, and replaced it. So they made the structure sound and safe. And then I went in and redid floors and redid the interior, wired it, redid some ceiling, painted. So I did a lot of that work. Sided outside. Did a lot of that myself. Shingled. Yep.
And that, looking at that house now, and Rome wasn't built in a day, but I just think about all that work to maintain that house.
There's a picture that we were given. The house was built in 1865 by some people from Massachusetts. It was a summer house for them. And there's a picture of them sitting outside in their probably Sunday best. And I can see I assume the husband sitting there in a chair looking very comfortable and stately. And there are 2 or 3 women in the picture. And it's just, the house is white. The lines are pristine. The house has so much character. And to take it from what it was to where it was when we left it, and to see what the new owners have done to it, it's just an incredible legacy to bring that house back to, it was, most people, a lot of family members, well, not a lot of family members, Laurie's father said, why don't you just bulldoze it? Because it's not worth anything. And, the back L of the house had no foundation. So we had Dickie Holbrook, who had this specialized bulldozer that could get underneath buildings. He actually did the same thing at Binky's house next door, probably 40 years before that. And he dug a foundation, or dug a hole, and we put a foundation underneath that part of the house to make it more stable, more secure, more comfortable. And from that, what was the result of that digging that we did? Do you remember? The big the big dirt pile out back?
Oh, I don't really. I mean, I kind of remember that, but not really. That was,
You probably
I probably remember pictures of it.
Yeah.
More than I remember it.
Well, that was the greatest playground ever.
Yeah.
And 4 little towheads out there playing in that great big dirt pile, mostly in your diapers.
Yeah. I remember better when you redid the septic before we sold.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a dirt bike track around our entire lawn.
Yeah.
And I would bike through it as fast as I could. And just go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Lucian is born and Jamie is born in the old house.
Yes.
And how does that change your life?
Wow, I just remember when Lucian was born. The impact on a child, on a husband and wife, is amazing. The husband in a very different way than a wife. The woman, and if I'm sexist, I don't mean to be. I watched this happen, and I watched your mother go from being who she is to this inner protectant, loving, nobody's going to harm my baby. I'm going to take care of my baby to the best of my ability and beyond. And not that I didn't feel that as a father, but that connection, that God-given connection of how that relationship develops. I mean, and of course it's that way. The child was in the mother's womb for 9 months. They've known each other for 9 months already. And all of a sudden, out comes this child, and all that those two bodies have gone together, the bond that happens there is absolutely amazing. And, for me, the changes for me were, okay, I've got someone else I need to take care of, to love, and now all of a sudden, your mom is very distracted by this child, so I've got to figure out how to, continue to love her and also give her grace and patience through all that she's going through. It was a very interesting time, and, I was working and trying to figure out how to just keep going through that very drastic change.
So you have those two. You buy some people call it the Jack House.
So we were living in the Jack House.
Oh, you were living in the Jack House. You buy the Red House.
Yes.
Okay. How old was Jamie when you moved in?
Jamie was 3.
So you had me instantly.
Yeah, you were born. So let's see. You were born in 1991, and we moved in April of 90.
Okay, so you'd been there a year before I was born.
Almost. I mean, I think we moved in April of 90. It was right around that time frame because we had been working on it throughout the winter. And when we moved in, we had gutted the house. We paid somebody to finish the kitchen and to finish the bathroom. The rest of the rooms were in a state of disrepair, but we knew if we had a kitchen and we had a bathroom, and I'm sorry, there was a third floor sort of loft bedroom that was big enough for a full-size mattress and a single mattress on the floor. And we slept on the full mattress, and Lucian and Jamie slept on the single mattress. And the way we did that is they were small, so we short-sheeted, the one side of the bed so that they were sleeping toe-to-toe in the same bed. And we did that for, probably a year, I would say. And then slowly we would finish a bedroom and then another bedroom and work our way sort of around the house. And when I say finish, my saying about done.
Which is?
That done is a 4-letter word to be used sparingly.
Mm-hmm.
So we would finish rooms, then we'd ultimately go back and refinish the room and progress along the way. And by the time Juliet was born, the house was, definitely livable. All the rooms had been through at least their first phase of renovation, and it was easier to live in the house, comfortable.
Okay, so you lived there a year. I'm born. Juliet's born. You were waiting to have me because from what I understand, you had babies when you wanted to have babies and didn't have babies when you didn't plan to have babies.
Well, there was no planning.
Okay.
There was no waiting.
Okay. So I happened to come
Mm-hmm.
then.
Yep.
And same with Juliet. Juliet's 13 months younger than me.
Right.
Which is crazy by today's standards.
Yeah. So all of you, we had 4 kids under the age of 5.
Yeah. Mom's not working.
Mom is not working at this time. She did when Lucian went to work. When Lucian was born, her plan was to return to work, and so she did her maternity leave. She was able to take. I think Unum was a great company to work for. They were very good with their benefits. She was able to, I think, have 6 weeks before he was born at home, and then he was born. I think she had 6 weeks after with him. Then she went back to work. It was extremely difficult for her. She had childcare lined up with at Unum at their daycare, and she could tell you much better than I can because I didn't experience it myself, but she dropped him off, and I think it was the worst experience of her life, leaving that child behind.
I think, doesn't she say she came to pick him up and he was sitting in the swing crying by
Yes,
himself?
he was sitting in this. That's right. He was sitting in the swing crying by himself, and that just, was so devastating to her. And in very short order, I don't know the time frame, she found a friend who, a friend from her growing up who was watching her own child and would take Lucian. And, that worked out better. And it wasn't long, though, before this woman who, when I met your mom, she had grown up with her mother as a career woman, and your mom was going to be a career woman. And then having Lucian, and then really what happened is when she became pregnant with Jamie, knew that the switch just went off in her head from the corporate life, and it was the mother that she wanted to be that was most important. So when coming into Jamie's birth, she was done and gave notice and stayed home from there.
So we get to me and Juliet. Lucian is 5. Jamie's 4. I'm 1, and Juliet is born. And then it's kind of off to the races from there.
We bought Sugarloaf that year.
Did you when Juliet was born?
Yep, 1992 we bought Sugarloaf.
Okay, so
Juliet was born in May, and in October we bought Sugarloaf.
you were like, we finally finished this house. How can we mess our life up?
Yeah, well, the house
What's
wasn't
fine?
really finished.
Yeah.
It was in some ways,
Yeah.
because we hadn't renovated the barn at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, it wasn't about, I think it's sometimes it's not about finishing. It's about doing and what's next. And that was what was the next thing for us because, like you say, 5, 4, 3, and 1. So it's time to start doing as a family. And for me growing up, Sugarloaf was a huge part of my doing and loving life and being outdoors and being with people. And I wanted so much for you guys to have that experience. And Mom had skied when she was a kid with her grandparents and mom and her mom's husband, Martin. So she had that connection. And Mom and I had skied some when we were dating and a little bit when we were married. We actually spent our honeymoon at Killington Resort. By the way, it rained all but one day that we were there. Could have something to do with your brother being born 9 months later.
Yeah.
So skiing, big part of life. And, my parents had the place at Sugarloaf where we would go and could clearly see that, it would be better for us to have our own place up there. And so we started looking around, and all of a sudden there's a property on the West Mountain Trail that's been for sale several times, and now it's for sale again, and it's like exactly what we'd love to have. And it comes up for auction. No, was it? No, it was for sale. It came up for sale again, and come to find out it was bank owned. And we talked about it, and I said to your mom, let's make an offer on it. Let's see what happens. And I think they were asking maybe 175 for it.
Oh my gosh, that house today would be worth $1 million.
And we offered 150,
That's crazy.
and they took it. And there's a Sugarloaf story from there. I remember driving the truck up to deliver, and we had a breakaway apartment. So in order to fund that part of our life, we didn't have money. I mean, we had some money. We had the most wonderful bank, and I went to them and I said, can we do this? And they said, well, give us a plan on how you're going to use the property, because we were planning to rent it. We knew that might be necessary. We had a breakaway, a small apartment, referred to as, it's a small apartment.
Not that small though.
No, right. Not that small. Actually, it was 2-bedroom.
Because the bunk room hadn't been.
The bunk room was, I can't remember if we did actually rent the bunk room because we converted the garage to a bunk room.
Yeah.
And maybe in the first year that was part of the rental. So there were 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a bathroom, and a laundry room downstairs. And then we had the full house upstairs, which was 4 bedrooms. 4 bedrooms? 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms. Yes. And so I went to the bank and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to rent the breakaway every year, which didn't cover the cost, but it was pretty close. And then we rented upstairs some to cover the rest of the costs. And they said yes. So we bought it and started the rental process. And what we would do, we were scrimping by, making lots of sacrifices for a wonderful life. I mean, I say sacrifices. Geez, what we were getting for those sacrifices was amazing. We would go up there and we would rent the breakaway without the bunk room. We would rent the upstairs, and we would stay in the bunk room, which had a single door that led outside, and all of us would sleep in there. We'd have all of our stuff in there, and there was no showers. We would bring food in. There was no toilet, so we brought one of those RV porta potties in. And I wouldn't say that we did that a lot, but there were probably 5 or 6 weekends that we would do that, and it got us by. And year after year, we would make a little more progress, and ultimately, we figured it out.
Most people would have just stayed home that weekend. It's not like you didn't have a place to sleep. It's like you wanted to go to the mountains so bad.
Yeah.
That you would sleep in that garage.
Yeah.
Bunk room.
Yeah. Part of that fun that I've always sought, the clean fun, and, getting to Sugarloaf has always been sort of, it's far enough away that you get beyond the sort of day to day.
Okay, so you bought Sugarloaf when Juliet was born.
Juliet was born, and Juliet, the way the setup was, you and Lucian shared a bedroom. Jamie had a bedroom, and Juliet slept in the closet at the top of the stairs. We had her crib in that closet. I'm trying to remember. We had plenty of bedrooms. I don't know why that was. I guess just to have her on the same floor as us, that must have been the reason why.
I remember the way I remember sleeping is me and Lucian shared a room for some amount of my childhood, and then Lucian was upstairs on the 3rd floor loft.
Now you're talking about in Days Ferry.
Oh, sorry, you're talking about at Sugarloaf.
I'm talking about Sugarloaf. Yeah, when Juliet was born and we would go to Sugarloaf, she would be in a crib in the closet at the top of the stairs.
Okay. Wow. All right, so we spent every weekend at Sugarloaf.
Winters.
In the winters.
Yes. From the beginning of the season.
I don't remember
First tracks.
Not doing that.
Yeah.
Juliet was born in 92. Okay, so you had taken the other kids up via Grammy and Binky's
Yes.
camp up there.
Yeah.
And then got your own place, and then I feel like there's a time, but like 92 to 2000 where I don't really remember. I mean, I could, pick a memory here or there, but I don't remember most of that. What was going on? I mean, because once you have all four of us, it's not like, okay, and then the fifth person was born. There's no fifth person.
Right.
So you're kind of in a groove. Lucian's in school. Juliet's, a baby.
Yeah. Yeah, boy. It was a lot. There was a lot of fog and blur at that point.
Sure.
The ground was swelling with movement of young children, and life was busy. Activities, starting school, people growing up.
When does mom start to do side work?
Well, great question. And she really started, I would say 3 or 4 years. No, is it that long? No. It was within the first year and a half probably. She needed an outlet, and she'd grown up in the restaurant business. When she was in high school, college, she would work at restaurants, and so she migrated back to that. So a couple nights a week, she would wait tables or bartend someplace, and that was her escape. I'd come home, and she'd basically be walking out the door and have a fun time. I'd come in and cook dinner. Sometimes she probably would have dinner ready for us. On occasion, I would make breakfast for dinner.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
dad move. Power move.
I do like breakfast. And she would go off and work and then come home, later at night and get up and start the next day. And usually, she'd come home and somebody would be up in the middle of the night, and, she would get up early in the morning and nap when she could, and then kind of keep doing. And I was at that point in time, so I'm, let's see, if we're 92, so I'm in 1990, I started working in Portland, and I'm commuting every day.
You're no longer with Bisson.
I am with Bisson.
Oh, in Portland.
Yeah. So again, back to my Pinky and Uncle Francis growing the business. They had a long time ago, actually before third generation was really coming into light, they bought or started an office in Portland. And
where was it in Portland?
Beginning, it was not far off Congress Street. They had storage there. And then there was an office out on Riverside Drive. And that's where it was when I was just starting to.
In those days, there wasn't self-storage.
Yeah, there was, but not very
big.
Not
not
like
it is now.
No.
So when people have stuff in storage, it's from a move, and they're like, "Oh, we can't fit that stuff for now." Like, what is storage like?
Well, storage would have been that, and it just like it is now. It could have been a house that the parents lived in, and they passed on, and there are kids who don't have any place to put the furniture, but they don't want to let it go, so they'll store it for who knows how long. So there was a lot of that we had stored. So I'm commuting to Portland, but the office has now moved to Scarborough. So there was a 10,000 square foot warehouse in Scarborough that I went down to work in. There was another man that had been hired to manage the location. And historically, the Portland office was hard to keep someone in who was sort of culture and, would do things the way the Bissons would want them done. And there wasn't a lot of growth coming out of there. So I went down and started working there. And then ultimately the decision was made that this guy wasn't the right fit at that particular point in time. He taught me a lot too. He was a good guy. His heart was in the right place. He was from out of state, and it's unfortunate that it didn't work out for him. So I ultimately became the manager of the terminal, our office.
And that was that moving? Did you have trucks and?
Oh yeah,
moving and storage, or just storage?
Oh, both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We had. I mean, the focus, the time, the effort was always spent on the moving. The storage was in terms of effort and time, a small portion of it, the revenue from the storage was big compared to the moving part of it.
Okay, so you had West Bath. Was there Brunswick?
No, West Bath, Augusta, and Portland. And at that point in time, we had an office in New Hampshire.
Okay. And so in 1990, you're working in Portland. When does the next career change happen?
In 1990, I'm working in Portland for the company, and then I've lost track now of when the business sold, because I went to work for Noyes, Earl W. Noyes and Sons United Van Lines so in 1990, I started working in Portland, and that was when the company was being sold.
When you went to work in Portland, did you know it was going to be sold?
Yes.
You were like, I'm finishing out.
No, I'm not finishing out. The decision was made, and it was the best decision for my father and uncle, and really
everyone else.
I believe for everyone else, that they would sell the business. And it took a couple of years once to finally find a buyer and to make it all come together. And when that happened, I was still in the mindset that this was the family business. It had been owned by somebody else, and yet I could do my best to grow in this new environment and thrive, and I would run the business. And that was my mentality. And so I'm now in Portland working, adjusting to this new environment, and had some great people that were working there. An older gentleman, Herb Crosby, was a salesman he'd spent a lot of time in television advertising. I think it was CBS that he worked with, and he was a consummate professional, really nice man who took me under his wing and did his best to take this young person who was, making his way in the world, and taught me some great things. I'm grateful for that. And, it wasn't an easy thing because we were young. It was actually, ultimately, it became myself, your Aunt Holly, and your cousin David. David was...
Your cousin David.
My cousin David, yes. Yeah. Who was... We were running that operation on a day-to-day basis.
In Portland.
We're all commuting down
to
there to run it, because David's in Brunswick, Holly's in Woolwich, as am I. And it was challenging. We're all trying to figure out how to make this work, and we're all trying to figure out how to make this work working for somebody else. Ultimately, some things happen, and all of a sudden, the bright light that I'd always had started to get dim, and I could see that because the way the purchase of the company was structured, I would not be involved in a lot of the financial things with the company, because your grandparents and uncle still owned, and uncle's family owned the real estate, and the owner was paying rent. And I'll never forget the time when I was out in the warehouse with the new owner, and I could sense some stress in him, and I said, what's happening, and he said something about, I don't know if we're going to be able to pay the rent this month. And that was a big hit against the head for me, because I realized, oh yeah, and the rent he's paying is going to my parents and my uncle and his wife. And I'm not going to be involved in some of these conversations, because they're not going to want to say, oh yeah, we're not paying the Bissons this month because we don't have the cash. And that's when my mind changed and clicked and said, okay, what was going to be my life has now changed, and I got to figure out a new focus.
Mm-hmm. And that was 1990?
That would have been, no. That was probably 1992.
Okay, so you're 30. 30 years old.
No, it would have been before 92. It's like 91.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right
29
around
or
30 years old. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so I'm searching. What am I going to do? What's my next step here? And
Did you feel prepared to like go out on your own, or did you feel like, oh shoot, I have no idea what I'm doing?
Well, I guess I'll answer that by saying the decision that I came across was my next step would be to go into education. I'd become a teacher.
Really?
Yeah.
So you had no idea what you were doing?
I had no idea what I was doing. I was lost. Well, I would say before this,
because you obviously didn't do that.
yeah, before this, when you talk about great people in your life, I was very fortunate that Buzz Fitzgerald, who was the then president of Bath Iron Works, was a good family friend, and he was willing to be a mentor of mine at that time in my life. And I would meet with him about once a quarter down at the Ironworks in his office, and I'd have a list of questions. And I'd always wanted to. I envisioned when I was running the business having a board of directors that was an outside voice, and those people would help direct the company, and it would help keep it on track. Because in the family structure, well, you know how that works.
Yep.
And so when the business got sold, I pretty quickly scheduled my meeting with Buzz for the quarter and said, Buzz, I need a job. My parents are selling the business. Can I come to work here? And when I look at those little hash marks in your life that, if they're binary, however you want to look at them, he said, this is not the place for you, Rick. This is not where you want to be. And that was the best advice I ever got, because I could have gone into there and I could have put a lot of my time and energy, and I think it would have succeeded. However, it wasn't where I was meant to be.
It's like when we tell people not to buy a house. This is not the house you want to buy.
Be happy for the ones that got away.
Yeah.
And so Mom and I together decided that I would be a teacher. And so to do that, I would have to get a teaching degree. And the University of Southern Maine had what they call their ETAP program, which was extended teaching. It was a teaching program. Basically, in 1 year, you could get your master's degree. And then you did a year after that as a intern, or I don't know what it was called. But you could start as a teacher at a very low salary the second year. So we were going to go 1 year without an income. No job, no benefits. Mom was going to do her restaurant thing to create income so that we could pay our bills. I'm sure I would work on the side, but I would go to school. I got accepted into the school and I was ready to go. And then, so I would start that, I believe, in January, because I think I could start that in January. And in November, the November before that January, I got a call from Peter Noyes at Earl W. Noyes and Sons, who, my philosophy always in competition, whether it was sports or business, was to befriend your competitor, to learn as much about them as you can, to be civil, to be sort of not difficult, I guess, because you could be one or the other mostly. And so I had a good relationship with competitors, and I really liked Peter Noyes. He was a good guy, and his father, Lester. It was a family business. And
did Lester start it?
No, Lester's father started it.
So Peter is third gen.
Peter's third generation, yep. And they're in the fourth now.
Yeah.
So success to them. Peter called me and said, Rick, don't know what's going on with you. And of course, the business had sold now, so he might have thought there might be some potential. He said, I don't know what you're doing, but our vice president of operations has just stepped away. He's going back to work for LL Bean, and just wondered if you might have a conversation. So I did. I remember going into his office and sitting there, and Earl W. Noyes and Sons was the pinnacle of the moving business for anybody in Maine. when we would sit around and talk about how to improve things, the comparison most of the time would be, well, look at what Noise is doing. Look at what Noise is doing. How are they doing it? And I remember sitting in his office and having a conversation and him describing what I might be doing. And 2 meetings later, and a meeting with Lester and Lester's attorney, which I realized wasn't really me learning about them as much as it was their attorney meeting me and giving Lester the thumbs up and thumbs down on, take a risk with this guy. Because I'm a Bisson going to work for O.W. Noyes and Sons. And I know that the new owner of Bisson Moving and Storage was pretty reliant on the fact that I would never go anywhere because my name was Bisson. And how could I go to work for a competitor?
That is hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. I had no contract. I had no non-compete.
That's amazing. And you knew everything that you knew. I mean, not that you knew everything, but you were pretty involved in the business.
They were in denial that I was leaving. I remember a call from the general manager, vice president, I'm sure he was by that time. And the question was, he talked to me. I had gone in to the owner and said, I'm leaving. And he wasn't prepared. And then I got a call the next day from the general manager who I worked with, and he mentored me in the business, good guy, good friend. And he said, well, we'd like to keep you around, Rick, for, 6 months or so. Or maybe it was 6 weeks. It could have been 6 days. It was too long. I gave them 2 weeks, I believe is what I gave them. And I said, I can. I said, you don't want me here. I'm a competitor now. Anything that I hear or see, I'm not saying I'm going to use it, but, we all need to move on here.
Yeah. And
I moved on. They were the best people I've ever worked for. Really good, really solid. Allowed me to do my work. I loved Peter Noyes' philosophy about work.
What was that?
Well, philosophy or his approach, I remember when we'd have challenges or people not doing things, he always came back to, well, if everybody just did their job, we'd be okay. And that's so true.
Lester's father started the business.
Earl.
Yep. W. Noyes and Sons. Okay. Lester is the entrepreneurial generation like Binky, my grandfather Richard, and my great uncle Francis. And then
and Lester worked with his brother Howard and Wendy.
Okay.
And then Wendy went off and started his own business. Wendy was Earl as well, but called Wendy. And Wendy went off and started his own moving business. And Howard eventually was bought out by Lester.
Okay. And what happened with Wendy?
He had his own business that I don't know if he ever sold it or what happened to it. Yeah.
Okay. So then Peter and was there another? There was just Peter, right?
Just Peter. Peter has a sister who's in real estate, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Peter is the third generation, which has to be a corporate, much more corporate approach versus entrepreneurial approach. Did you feel that?
Yes and no. The one thing that we always marveled about, and when I got there at Noyes, marveled about were the systems that they had in place. In the entrepreneurial world, you're always changing things. You're always looking for the silver bullet, for the golden nugget, the magic penny that, fixes everything. And you're always looking for that, and you're always jumping to the next shiny object. And that was the thing that I marveled at Noyes. They had a system in place that worked. It might have been a little dated. It worked, and I could bring some ideas there, but they didn't need a lot of ideas. They just needed the work to be done within the system, and they needed help with people, and I was good with people.
Did that give you peace that you didn't have to figure stuff out necessarily?
Yeah, after a while I did.
Yeah.
And I realized where my place was. Not my place. I realized where my creativity could be used best. And that just evolved. I could see it kind of coming into play. That really what my role there was to help facilitate people's growth, the growth of the people who were the men and women who were working on the trucks, and that I hired a lot of people. They're still doing that now. It's not that anything I left behind is not being done. I think it continues to be done very well because now they're in the fourth generation, and Peter's two sons are, and I'm not sure if the daughter's involved or not. Yep.
What did you learn from that transition from working? I've never heard it put that way. That I knew you were working for the competition, whatever, but the business had been sold. So to me, it's like, it's not really.
Oh, it was like a divorce.
Yeah, that's crazy. What did you learn
I
from
say
that?
divorce. I've never been through that, so I don't know.
Did your family feel any like, Rick, what are you doing? Or were they totally supportive?
I never felt unsupported. And I know that it was hard for Binky because that was the end.
But that was their decision.
Oh yeah. That closed the door for him. It was, I think he, like me, thought by remaining in Bisson that, the legacy would be carried on. And of course, it's not just me either. It's my cousins that are still working for the new owner. Mm-hmm. That was, there was still some hope that at least while Binky and Uncle Francis was still around, there'd be some Bisson still working there. And your Aunt Holly, God bless her, she worked there for a long time after. Mm-hmm. So I think it was hard from that perspective. And yet, my family knew that what I was doing was the best for my family. And no, I never felt like I never felt from anybody that I'd gone to the dark side necessarily. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I was just doing.
Yeah.
I was doing what I needed to do.
I feel like that's something that I've learned from you and Mom, that, a lot of times looking back, I'll be thinking like, oh, I wonder what was I thinking there? What were they thinking there? And I think about the hard-ish things I've been through, fixing up my first house or whatever it was, buying my duplex or anything that's challenged me to go outside of myself. And it's like, man, I wasn't thinking at all. You think about it after, about how you felt or whatever, but you're just like trying to survive. You're not thinking, when you're drowning, you're not thinking, this is terrible, I hate this. You're just fighting. Yeah. You're not thinking about,
right,
what is it like to drown? Mm-hmm. It's like you're just trying to keep your head above the water. That's all you know. Mm-hmm.
It makes me think about when we were talking about the White House. That's what we usually refer to it as now because it's across the street from the Yellow House that we live in. When we were renovating the White House, and we had all four of you, and we were, again, going through the kind of second round of renovations, and that included sanding all the floors in the bedrooms upstairs. And we'd go room by room, and at one point in time, it made sense to move all four of you downstairs into what was and became the dining room. So we took the single beds and lined them up along the walls, and you all were sleeping in that one room. And Mike Ryan, who we affectionately refer to as Uncle Mike, came by one night to visit. I don't remember exactly why. And it was around probably after dinner time. I'm reading to all of you in the bedroom because that was what we did every night. And it was great because I could read one book to all four of you. I probably read more than one book because everybody would have a book to read from, but we would do that in that room. And Uncle Mike came by at that time, and it was a light bulb for him because he realized in his mind he needed to have everything figured out and sorted through before he got married, before he started a family, and he was working on his business at that point in time, and he felt, and agreeably so, he wanted to have things lined up. And pretty sure he verbalized this with me too at some point in time. He said, I saw that and I realized that, You don't have to have it all squared away.
Yeah.
It's life, and it's a moving target,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no. When you're climbing the stairs, you may take 2 steps sometimes. Sometimes you may be going up, sometimes you may be going back, but you're on the stairs.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's a great place to stop for today. Anything you want to say before we close out?
Yeah, go get it.
Cool. All right. Love you, Dad.
Love you, Benjamin. Thanks.
Okay, until next time, we'll be back next week, and we'll pick up with you at Earl W. Noyes and Sons and us at Sugarloaf.
Great.